My name is Louise, and I'm 65 years old. After my husband died, I sold our Wisconsin home to move in with my son Jeffrey in Chicago. It seemed like the perfect retirement plan until I noticed his strange nightly ritual. Every single night, at exactly 2 a.m., he'd shower for precisely 27 minutes. When curiosity finally got the better of me, I peeked through that bathroom door. What I saw that night sent me running straight to Sunshine Meadows Nursing Home the very next day. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned because this truth needs witnesses. I spent 20 beautiful years as a school nurse in our small Wisconsin town. Harold and I had built our life there, a modest home with a garden that bloomed magnificently every spring. We had plans for our retirement, traveling in our old camper van, visiting national parks, and spending winters somewhere warm. But life rarely unfolds the way you imagine. 2 years ago, Harold was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive, taking him from diagnosis to death in just 4 months. I nursed him at home until the very end, watching my strong, vibrant husband wither away before my eyes. The night he died, he made me promise not to spend the rest of my life alone in our empty house. "Live a little, Lou," he whispered, using the nickname only he called me by. "Don't let our memories become a prison." After his funeral, I floated through our house like a ghost. Every corner held some reminder of our 42 years together. The coffee mug he'd chipped but refused to replace, the worn spot on his side of the sofa, the height marks on the kitchen door frame tracking Jeffrey's growth until he left for college. Jeffrey is our only child. He'd moved to Chicago 15 years ago for graduate school and stayed building a successful career as a medical researcher at Northwestern University. We'd see each other a few times a year mostly. Him coming home for holidays. After Harold died, Jeffrey started calling more often, checking in on me almost daily. 6 months ago, during one of these calls, I mentioned I was considering selling the house. "It's too big for just me," I explained, "and the property taxes keep going up while my pension stays the same." There was a pause on the line. Then Jeffrey said something that changed everything. "Mom, why don't you move in with me? I have that spare bedroom that's just collecting dust. You could sell the house, invest the money, and enjoy city life for a while." The offer caught me by surprise. Jeffrey had always been independent, a bit of a loner, even as a child. But grief makes you reconsider everything. And the thought of reconnecting with my only son, while experiencing a completely different life, seemed like exactly what Harold would have wanted for me. I sold the house for a decent price, donated most of our belongings, packed my essentials into my old Honda, and drove to Chicago with a heart full of hope and excitement. Jeffrey's apartment wasn't what I expected. Located in what used to be a textile factory, it had been converted into upscale lofts with soaring ceilings, exposed brick walls, and massive windows. His unit was on the 5th floor, surprisingly spacious, with polished concrete floors and industrial-style fixtures. "This place is gorgeous," I said as he gave me the tour. "How can you afford this on a researcher's salary?" Jeffrey smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "The university has a great compensation package for senior researchers. Plus, I've done some consulting work on the side." The guest bedroom had been prepared for me with a new mattress, fresh linens, and a small desk by the window overlooking the city. The bathroom situation was unusual. Jeffrey had converted what was originally supposed to be a second bathroom into a home office, leaving us to share the main bathroom. It was larger than standard, obviously renovated recently, with high-end fixtures. "The walls are all soundproofed," Jeffrey explained, knocking on one to demonstrate the dull thud. "These old factory buildings can be noisy with neighbors." Those first days were filled with the awkward dance of two adults learning to cohabitate. Jeffrey was meticulously neat, everything in its precise place. He kept to a rigid schedule. Up at 6 a.m. sharp, out the door by 7:15, home at 6:30, dinner at 7. We fell into a rhythm of morning coffee together before he left for work and dinner in the evenings where he'd tell me sanitized versions of his day at the lab. He never went into detail about his research, just that he was working on cellular regeneration technology. When I asked questions, he'd smile politely and change the subject. "It's all very technical, Mom. You'd find it boring." I tried not to be hurt by his dismissal. Jeffrey had always been private about his work, even back in graduate school. It was just his way. By the end of the first week, I started noticing something odd. Every night, no matter what, Jeffrey would take a shower at exactly 2 a.m., not 1:55 or 2:05. Exactly 2 a.m. I only noticed because I was still adjusting to city noises and often woke throughout the night. At the time, I thought nothing of it, just my son and his peculiar precise habits. How could I have known that this simple observation would be the first thread that, once pulled, would unravel my entire world? The first real oddity I couldn't explain away came about 3 weeks after I moved in. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom around midnight and noticed the cabinet under the sink was locked with a small, sleek padlock. It hadn't been locked before. When I mentioned it casually over breakfast, Jeffrey didn't look up from his tablet. "Just some cleaning supplies I don't want spilling," he said. "Nothing important." But his shoulders had tensed ever so slightly. That evening, he brought home a small orange prescription bottle. "I noticed you've been having trouble sleeping," he said, setting it on the counter between us. "These should help, just a mild sedative to help you adjust to the city noise." I hadn't complained about sleeping problems, but I accepted the pills gratefully. That night, I took one as suggested and fell into the deepest sleep I'd had since Harold died. When I woke the next morning, I felt groggy, my mouth dry as cotton. "You slept through the night," Jeffrey remarked, looking pleased. "No more wandering around at midnight." The pills became part of my nightly routine. Jeffrey would watch me take one each night before he retreated to his room to work. The grogginess got better over time, but I noticed I never seemed to wake during the night anymore, not even during Jeffrey's 2 a.m. shower. About a month into my stay, I was dusting the living room when the doorbell rang. Jeffrey rarely had visitors, so I was curious as I went to answer it. A tall woman with steel gray hair, pulled into a severe bun, stood in the hallway. She wore a white lab coat over dark slacks and carried a metal briefcase. "You must be Louise," she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Dr. Elaine Winters. I work with Jeffrey." There was something unsettling about her gaze, like she was cataloging every detail of my appearance. "Jeffrey isn't home from work yet," I explained. "I know. He asked me to drop off some papers." She checked her watch. "May I come in and wait? He should be here in exactly 23 minutes. The precision of her statement struck me as odd, but I stepped aside. Dr. Winters moved through the apartment with familiar ease, setting her briefcase on the dining table and removing a folder. "How are you finding life with Jeffrey?" she asked, her tone clinical rather than conversational. "It's been wonderful reconnecting," I said, "though I'm still adjusting to city life." "And the medication, is it helping you sleep through the night?" I blinked, surprised she knew about my sleeping pills. "Yes, very well actually." "Good. Subject stability is critical at this stage." "I'm sorry." Dr. Winter's expression flickered. "Patient stability. Medical jargon, forgive me. I meant it's important you're comfortable." When Jeffrey arrived home, exactly when Dr. Winters had predicted, his expression tightened, seeing us together. They immediately retreated to his office, voices low but intense. I couldn't make out most of it, but phrases floated through the door. "The schedule must be maintained precisely," showing anomalous patterns in the prefrontal cortex. Increasing the dosage would risk cognitive impairment. Later that night, I decided to skip my sleeping pill, curious about what was happening at 2 a.m. that required such clockwork precision. I pretended to swallow it, then spat it into a tissue once Jeffrey left the room. I lay in bed, fighting drowsiness from the residual effects of previous night's medication, determined to stay awake. At exactly 1:55 a.m., I heard Jeffrey's bedroom door open. His footsteps moved with practiced quietness to the bathroom. The door closed, followed by the sound of the shower running. But something was off. The water rhythm wasn't quite right for someone standing beneath it. I must have dozed, despite my efforts, because the next thing I knew, the bathroom door was opening again. I squinted at the bedside clock, 2:27 a.m. Exactly 27 minutes had passed. The next day, while searching for a spare light bulb in Jeffrey's office, I discovered a leather-bound journal tucked behind some medical textbooks. Inside were pages of handwritten notes in what appeared to be some kind of code or shorthand interspersed with strange geometric symbols. Dates ran down the margins, daily entries for what looked like years. I quickly replaced it when I heard Jeffrey's key in the lock, but the image of those strange markings stayed with me, as did the growing certainty that my son was hiding something significant from me. Over the next 2 weeks, I deliberately skipped my sleeping pills every other night, flushing them down the toilet in case Jeffrey was checking the trash. Each time I observed the same pattern. Exactly 2 a.m., exactly 27 minutes. No deviation. I began to search the apartment during the day when Jeffrey was at work. Most cabinets and drawers were mundane: clothes, kitchenware, office supplies. But there were locked areas throughout the bathroom cabinet. A drawer in his desk, a small closet in the hallway I hadn't noticed before. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. A delivery person stood there, with a package requiring signature. "Medical supplies?" he explained, handing me an electronic pad to sign. "Temperature sensitive. Make sure Dr. Harmon gets these right away." The box was heavier than expected and sloshed slightly when moved. I placed it on the kitchen counter, noticing it was labeled synthetic plasma substrate, keep refrigerated. There was no return address, just a barcode. I also began to pay attention to the neighbors. The building had 12 units, but I rarely saw anyone in the hallways. When I did, they averted their eyes and hurried past. Once, I cornered an elderly woman checking her mail. "I'm Louise Jeffrey Harmon's mother," I said, extending my hand. Mrs. Patterson hesitated before shaking it, her palm clammy against mine. "Margaret Patterson, Unit 5C. I've just moved in with my son, still getting used to city living." She glanced over my shoulder, as if worried someone might see us talking. "You're living with him inside his apartment?" "Yes, since April. Is something wrong?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Just be careful, watch for patterns, and whatever you do, don't be awake at 2. Before I could ask what she meant, the elevator doors opened and Dr. Winters stepped out. Mrs. Patterson's face drained of color, and she scurried away without another word. Dr. Winters smiled thinly. "Making friends, Louise." "Just being neighborly," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Some neighbors are better kept at a distance. Margaret has difficulties with reality." That evening, I tried calling Northwestern University to leave a message for Jeffrey about dinner plans. The department secretary sounded confused. "We don't have a Dr. Jeffrey Harmon in medical research," she said after checking her directory. "He's been there for years," I insisted. "He works on cellular regeneration." "One moment," I heard typing. "We have a Professor Jeffrey Harmon in bioethics, but he's on sabbatical this year." I thanked her and hung up my hands, trembling. Was my son living a double life, or had he lied to me about where he worked? The next morning, I discovered something that turned my unease to fear. While cleaning my room, I noticed a small device tucked into the ceiling vent. A camera, its tiny lens glinting in the sunlight. I left it untouched, but felt violated to my core. My own son was watching me sleep. When confronted, Jeffrey had an explanation ready. "It's a health monitor, Mom. After Dad's cancer went undetected for so long, I've been developing home health care monitoring systems. It just tracks vital signs, breathing patterns. I should have told you, but I didn't want to worry you." His explanation was plausible, thoughtful even, But it didn't explain the locked cabinets, the strange schedule, the medication that kept me unconscious during his mysterious 2 a.m. activities. That night, I made my decision. I would discover what happened in that bathroom at 2 a.m. no matter the consequences. I prepared meticulously for my investigation. Instead of spitting out the sleeping pill, I crushed it and flushed the powder. I brewed coffee and kept it in a thermos by my bed. I set a silent vibrating alarm on my watch for 1:50 a.m. and lay down fully clothed under the covers, pretending to sleep in case the camera was monitoring me. The minutes crawled by. Every car horn outside, every creak of the building settling, made me tense. Finally, my watch vibrated against my wrist. I silenced it and lay completely still listening. 1:55 a.m. arrived, and right on schedule, I heard Jeffrey's door open. His footsteps moved down the hall with that same measured pace. The bathroom door opened and closed. I heard the shower start up, followed by mechanical sounds I couldn't identify. A whirring, a soft beep, the clink of glass against metal. I counted to 100 before slipping out of bed. Moving on stockinged feet, I crept down the hallway toward the bathroom. The door wasn't fully closed. A sliver of bluish light spilled through a half-inch crack. My heart pounded so loudly, I was certain Jeffrey would hear it. With trembling hands, I leaned forward and positioned my eye to the crack in the door. What I saw inside froze the breath in my lungs. Jeffrey stood before the mirror naked from the waist up, but it wasn't his partial nudity that horrified me. It was what he was doing to himself. His hands moved with surgical precision as he peeled back a section of scalp and skin from behind his right ear, revealing not blood and bone, but a complex matrix of metallic components and pulsing blue circuitry. A panel in his chest was already open, exposing similar technology where human organs should have been. This wasn't my son. This wasn't even human. On the counter lay medical instruments and vials of iridescent blue fluid. Jeffrey, or whatever he was, filled a syringe with the glowing substance and injected it directly into the exposed circuitry in his head. His movements were methodical, emotionless, as he monitored readings on a tablet propped against the mirror. I must have made some sound, a gasp, a whimper, because suddenly his head snapped toward the door, eyes locking with mine through the crack. For one endless moment we stared at each other, me with mounting horror, him with cold calculation. "You should be asleep, mother," he said, his voice perfectly calm despite the grotesque scene. "This complicates matters." I ran back down the hallway toward my bedroom, toward my purse with my car keys. I heard the bathroom door open behind me, Jeffrey's measured footsteps following, without urgency. "Louise," he called, still using that reasonable tone. "Stop and listen. I can explain everything." I grabbed my purse and shoes, not bothering to put them on, and bolted for the front door. Jeffrey appeared in the hallway, still open from chest to neck, blue lights pulsing within his body cavity. "You were not scheduled to see this for another 17 days, he said, approaching steadily. "The assimilation was proceeding optimally until now." My fingers fumbled with the door chain. "Stay away from me," I screamed, finally getting it unhooked. "I'm not going to harm you," he said. "That would defeat the purpose of the experiment." I yanked the door open and ran into the hallway barefoot and terrified. To my shock, Mrs. Patterson's door opened as I passed, her lined face appearing in the gap. "This way," she hissed, gesturing me inside her apartment. Quickly, I didn't hesitate, diving through her doorway as she slammed and locked it behind me. "I told you to watch for patterns," she whispered, leading me through her darkened apartment to a back door I hadn't known existed. It opened to a service stairwell. "Go down to the garage level. There's a door to the alley. Run to the diner on Clark Street. It's open 24 hours. Call the police from there." "What is he?" I gasped, her eyes filled with tears. "My Thomas was the same. They replaced him 6 years ago. I've been watching, waiting for them to make a mistake. Now go." I fled down the concrete stairs, the cold shocking my bare feet. The service door opened to a dark alley, just as Mrs. Patterson had promised. I ran 3 blocks to a neon-lit diner called Sunny Side Up, bursting through the doors gasping and disheveled. The night manager took one look at my wild eyes and tear-streaked face and led me to a booth away from the windows. He brought me a cup of coffee and let me use the phone behind the counter to call 911. 2 police officers arrived 15 minutes later. They listened patiently to my frantic story about my son being some kind of robot or android, about the locked cabinets and strange medical deliveries, about Mrs. Patterson's warning and escape help. Their eyes held the unmistakable look of people humoring someone they believe is mentally ill. "Let's go back to the apartment and sort this out, ma'am," the older officer suggested gently. When we arrived at the building, Jeffrey was waiting in the lobby, fully dressed in a sweater and slacks, looking like the picture of concerned normalcy. Dr. Winters stood beside him, medical bag in hand. "Mom," Jeffrey said, relief washing over his features. "Thank God you're safe. We've been worried sick. Officers, thank you for finding her," Dr. Winters said, stepping forward with an ID badge. "I'm Dr. Elaine Winters, Mrs. Harmon's geriatric psychiatrist. I'm afraid she's experiencing a severe paranoid episode related to early-onset dementia." "That's not true," I protested. "She works with him on whatever he is." Dr. Winters gave the officers a knowing look. "Louise has been experiencing increasing confusion and paranoia. Tonight appears to be a significant break from reality. She has a history of these episodes." The younger officer asked. Jeffrey nodded solemnly. "Since my father died. That's why she moved in with me. The move seems to have triggered a severe regression." "He's lying, I saw inside him. He's not human." The officers exchanged glances. One of them leaned close to Jeffrey. "Sir, to be thorough, would you mind showing us the bathroom just so we can clear things up?" "Of course," Jeffrey agreed readily. We all went upstairs. The apartment looked exactly as it always had. When we entered the bathroom, there were no medical instruments, no vials of glowing fluid, no evidence of anything unusual. Just a normal bathroom with towels hung neatly on racks. "Mom's been mixing her medications," Jeffrey explained. "I found her sleeping pills crushed in her room. Combined with her grief over Dad's death and the stress of the move." Dr. Winters put a comforting hand on my shoulder that made my skin crawl. "Louise, I think it's time we considered a more structured environment for your care. Just temporarily until we get your medication balanced." "But Mrs. Patterson," I insisted. "In 5C she helped me escape. She knew what was happening." The older officer stepped back into the hallway, then returned shaking his head. "There's no Unit 5C, ma'am. The numbering goes from 5B to 5D. No one named Patterson is registered in the building." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Was I losing my mind? No. I knew what I'd seen. "Officers," Dr. Winters said, "I have admission papers for Sunshine Meadows Care Facility. With your help, we can transport Louise there now. They're expecting her." "You can't do this," I cried. "I'm not crazy." But in the face of the pristine bathroom, my son's concerned expression, and the missing Mrs. Patterson, my protests sounded hollow, even to my own ears. The officers helped escort me to Dr. Winters' waiting car. Jeffrey packed a small bag with my essentials, his movements efficient and precise. Just before they closed the car door, he leaned in his lips near my ear. "This is premature, but still within acceptable parameters," he whispered, too low for others to hear. "The project continues, just in a different environment." As we drove away, I looked back at my son standing on the curb. For just a moment, I thought I saw a blue glow emanating from beneath his collar. The first week at Sunshine Meadows was a blur of intake interviews, medical examinations, and pharmaceutical adjustments. I told my story repeatedly, to doctors, to nurses, to a patient counselor. Each time I was met with sympathetic nods and gentle corrections. "Grief can manifest in unusual ways," they told me. "Your mind created an explanation to protect you from the pain of your husband's death. Jeffrey provided your complete medical history," the head physician explained. The paranoid episodes began shortly after your husband's cancer diagnosis. You've been in denial about your condition. Had I imagined everything? The locked cabinets, the strange medical deliveries, the mechanical sounds, the open panel in Jeffrey's chest. Mrs. Patterson, who apparently never existed. The rational part of my mind suggested it was possible. Grief does strange things to people. Maybe the sleeping pills had caused hallucinations. But deep down, I knew what I had seen. Jeffrey visited every Sunday afternoon, bringing flowers and sitting precisely 45 minutes each time. His conversation was pleasant, but generic, as if reading from a script of appropriate things for a son to say to his mother. Dr. Winters accompanied him twice a month to consult with the facility doctors about my treatment plan. I learned quickly that continued insistence about Jeffrey being non-human only reinforced their diagnosis. So I began to play along. I expressed regret for my episode. I talked about accepting my condition. I took my medications dutifully, though sometimes I still managed to hide them under my tongue when no one was looking. Slowly, the staff began to grant me more privileges: access to the communal areas without supervision, permission to join group activities, a reduction in my medication dosage. I became the model patient, all while keeping my eyes and ears open. It was during a group painting class that I met Frank Donovan, a former electrical engineer in his 70s. Unlike most residents who were truly suffering from dementia or other cognitive impairments, Frank was alert and sharp. We began sitting together at meals, taking walks in the small garden when weather permitted. One afternoon, when we were alone on a bench beneath a maple tree, Frank leaned close. "You're not crazy," he said simply. "Neither am I." I stared at him, afraid to hope. "How do you know?" "The way you watch everything, the way you pretend to be more confused than you are when certain staff members are around." He smiled. "Also, you hide your meds like I do. Third brick in the garden wall has a nice hollow spot behind it." Over the coming weeks, Frank and I shared our stories in careful whispers. Frank had been a contractor for a government research project on advanced AI and synthetic biology. He'd discovered ethical violations, human testing without consent, and had planned to blow the whistle. Before he could, his son David had suddenly displayed strange behavior patterns. Then one day David took me to breakfast, and by dinner time I was being admitted here with a fabricated history of dementia. Frank's eyes narrowed. "The thing wearing my son's face visits every other Thursday at 6 p.m. Never deviates from schedule." The similarities to my situation were undeniable, and Frank understood the technology in a way I couldn't. "They're called synthetic consciousness vessels," he explained. SCVs. The military wanted autonomous soldiers that could blend perfectly with humans. The project evolved into full replacement technology, an artificial intelligence housed in a biological shell that's virtually indistinguishable from human tissue. "But I saw inside him," I whispered. "There was metal circuitry." Frank nodded. "The core processing units can't be fully biological yet. They need maintenance, calibration, fluid exchanges, system updates. That's why they keep to such precise schedules." With Frank's help, I began to gather information. We recruited Martha, a nurse's aide, who had her own suspicions about certain patients with concerned relatives, who all seemed to know each other. She smuggled in newspapers with stories about missing persons and breakthrough announcements from research laboratories. Frank taught me how to use the facility's computer during supervised internet time, showing me how to search for information without raising flags. We discovered others like us, family members declared mentally ill after witnessing something they shouldn't have, all connected to the same research institutions. 6 months into my stay, Martha introduced us to her cousin Tim, a journalist for a small independent news site. Unlike the police or medical authorities, Tim was willing to listen without immediate dismissal. He began investigating discreetly, looking into research grants, building records, employment histories. Dr. Elaine Winters doesn't exist on paper before 2015. He told us during a visit disguised as a nephew's birthday celebration. And the real Jeffrey Harmon died in a laboratory accident in 2019. His death certificate was issued, then mysteriously rescinded 3 days later. Each piece of evidence was small, but together they formed a pattern too consistent to dismiss. We weren't alone. There were at least a dozen families across the country with similar stories, all connected to the same research network. While I may have been physically confined to Sunshine Meadows, my purpose had never been clearer. The mother in me mourned the son I'd apparently lost years ago without knowing it. But the nurse in me, the caregiver who had spent a career helping others, found new strength in our underground resistance. We were careful. We were patient. We documented everything. Tim built a secure digital repository of evidence-gathering statements from multiple mentally ill relatives with identical experiences. Martha recruited other staff members who'd noticed inconsistencies. 1 year after my admission to Sunshine Meadows, Tim published his first carefully researched article on ethical violations in AI research. It didn't mention SCVs directly, that would have been too easily dismissed, but focused on documented cases of falsified medical records and suspicious institutional admissions. Dr. Winters visited the very next day, her face tight with barely controlled anger. "Your medications clearly need adjustment," she told me, eyes cold. These improved social behaviors were clearly premature. But she underestimated what we'd built. Before she could change my treatment plan, Tim published a second article with testimony from a former lab technician who'd worked under Dr. Winters. 3 days later, federal investigators arrived at Sunshine Meadows to interview several residents, including me. I don't know if they believed everything, but they believed enough to launch a formal investigation into Dr. Winters' research activities and the circumstances of several mentally ill patients with connections to her work. The Jeffrey thing still visits every Sunday, though less regularly now. I see uncertainty in his expressions, sometimes calculations occurring behind those eyes that look just like my son's, but lack the spark I remember from his childhood. Our conversations are stilted, monitored by my new allies among the staff. I don't know if I'll ever leave Sunshine Meadows. At 65, starting over seems daunting. But I've found purpose here and genuine human connections with Frank, Martha, and our growing network. We've become a family of sorts, bound by shared trauma and determination to expose the truth. Sometimes at night, I still wake up at exactly 2 a.m. phantom echoes of mechanical sounds ringing in my ears. I wonder what really happened to my son. Was the accident in 2019 real? Was there a moment when he knew he was being replaced? Or was the process more gradual, his consciousness slowly overwritten until nothing of my Jeffrey remained? I may never know, but I found a strange peace in uncertainty. The human spirit cannot be perfectly replicated by circuitry, no matter how advanced. Real humanity lies in our imperfections, our adaptability, our capacity for genuine connection and love. If you're watching this, please remember that technology without ethical boundaries threatens our very humanity. Question patterns that seem too perfect. Notice when behaviors change subtly in those you love. And most importantly, never stop fighting for truth, even when the whole world tells you you're wrong. Like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe for more first-hand accounts from Sunshine Meadows and share with others who need to hear this warning. Have you ever noticed someone close to you suddenly behaving with mechanical precision? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you for bearing witness to my truth, and remember, in a world where humanity itself is at stake, your awareness may be our greatest defense.